want to move to the next wine, or
Sure,
we want
let's
to
do
ask
it.
some more questions?
Let's
Let's
either one.
Let's move on to the next one.
Okay.
We're good. We're gonna break this up into 2 parts here. This is gonna be a big boy. I like it.
Sorry, am I talking too
No,
long?
do not stop.
That's super informative.
It's super informative. Okay, so we're going, and the type of glassware matters.
Yeah, I'll touch on that. Give me a second.
Nice, dude. Absolutely.
So yeah, glassware does matter. It does and it doesn't. Okay, so here's the thing. If you are a person that likes to drink out of a mason jar, I'm all for it, 100%. Okay, I'm not a glass snob.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to everyday drinking wines. I will argue for investing in some halfway decent glasses for special wines, special occasion wines, because you will get more aromatically out of them and therefore more on your palate, because the more you smell, the more you taste, right?
Okay.
So we talked about earlier. So the most important thing with glassware is not name brand or anything like that. It is first and really only the thickness of the glass, especially at the top of the glass where you're going to drink from. So the thinner, the better, basically. And the reason for that is because the thinner the glass is, the more air is going to be introduced on your palate as you sip the wine. Okay. And air is really important to get the wine to express itself. That's why you often hear people like doing this kind of reverse whistle thing, this slurping thing.
Yeah.
When they taste wine like this. Right? All you're doing is aerating the wine on your palate.
Okay.
So that helps kind of release all the esters and aromatics so that your olfactory can pick them up and that you can smell and therefore taste more. Okay.
Wow.
So when you go want to buy some nice glasses, just look for the thinnest lips that you possibly can. Okay. Yeah, they'll make a nice noise and everything. But you also have to remember that the thinner they are, the easier they will break. So
They're expensive.
and they're expensive. Yeah.
Crystal Riedels we're talking about.
Yeah, or like Zalto or all the, Gabriel glass, all the hip names these days. And they're beautiful glasses. And they feel really nice too, because they're basically weightless, so that's a nice feeling. But it's not necessary. I would say for the average, person drinking wine that wants to get a little more out of it, find a happy medium. Find one that's like these. Thin, not a mason jar or Libby glass, but like not crazy thin either. It's somewhere in between where it's going to really help the wine express itself, and you're not going to blow through them by breaking them every time you wash them.
If you do break them, you're not super sad.
Yeah, exactly. You get something that, I don't know, costs retail $10 or $15 tops instead of $60, right? That's what the really nice ones cost. It's just not necessary. You can get plenty of pleasure out of something that is totally middle of the road, for sure. But it is, I would say, worth investing in some at that level, because you will get a lot more out of your wine. And then save the porch pounding Pinot Grigio for the mason jar in the middle of summer. That's cool. You don't need a glass every single time.
Put ice cubes in.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Lower wine. Right?
Yeah. If that's what they like, then go for it. There is no rules, really. Like, I hate when people get all snotty about wine, and the latest generation of sommeliers have worked very, very hard to dispel that snottiness and to make wine fun again. Wine should be fun.
Yeah.
It is fun. Doesn't need to be this lording of knowledge and this gatekeeping around wine. It's dumb, okay? Everyone should be enjoying wine. If someone wants to drink Pinot Grigio or New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc with ice cubes in a mason jar, they're drinking wine. I'm happy. That's all I care about. Yeah. I don't give a shit if it's in a good glass or if they're drinking at the perfect temperature or eating it with the right food. None of that matters. What matters is that they're drinking wine, okay, and not fucking booze or beer. No, I'm just kidding.
I was like,
no,
whoa, bro.
I'm just kidding. I love those things too. Just enjoying it, right?
Yeah. Drink some mezcal before.
Oh yeah. No, I'm just teasing. I love all things beverage. But yeah, we get. I think that whole old school image of a sommelier with the tasvan and the tux and everything. Yeah. It's just it didn't help our industry and didn't help make wine more approachable for more people. Yeah. And that's all I'm referring to now. So
Tyler almost wore his tux shirt today, but I told him not
Tux
to.
t-shirt.
Tuxedo t-shirt.
I got rid of that, guys. Way more highbrow than that.
Oh my gosh.
I got a tattoo
This is delicious.
on my neck.
You like this wine? Yeah. So the next wine is pretty cool. It's not as relatable is champagne. Everyone knows champagne, right? This is a wine called Rioja from Spain, which and most of what's made there is actually red. Okay, it's made from Tempranillo along with Garnacha and Mazuelo and a few other varieties, but mainly based on Tempranillo generally. And it's generally made in a very kind of rich and oxidative manner, kind of like I talked about earlier. So long time in barrel, excuse me, and it develops all these savory flavors like tobacco and leather and tar and mushroom and things like that, right? But this is taking a white variety and applying the same principles. So this is a variety called Vieira with a little bit of Macabeo, and it's from a legendary winery that's been around for well over a century called Lopez de Heredia. And it's a single vineyard called Viña Tendonia, which is their most highly regarded vineyard. And it spends a long time in basically neutral oak barrels, okay? So it's not getting a lot of those rich new oak flavors like vanilla and baking spice. It's more about the very slow exposure to oxygen, developing these kind of nutty type things. And it does spend some time on lees as well. So some of the same principles that we tasted in the champagne, but it's kind of almost like really aged still champagne in a lot of ways. Okay. So it's got a lot of nuttiness. It's got a lot of those savory things that we talked about before. There's more kind of bruised things that
We're
also.
talking about a white varietal that you can eat with a fatty piece of meat.
100%.
So
cool.
married.
Yeah.
Right?
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's
That's what I want to do in the summer.
really popping, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You want, again, you don't want to be drinking Cabernet when it's 85 degrees out. I don't, anyways. Maybe some people can do it, but for me, it's just, my palate just gets shot so fast, right? Because you've got wine that's, red wines are generally served at warmer temperatures than whites. And that's something to keep an eye on too for those of you listening that have an interest in wine and let's say only red wine, is to really drink your wines at roughly the right temperature. And when I say roughly, I mean for reds, you generally want them around 60 to 65 degrees, no warmer than that, because all you get is alcohol when they're too warm and they just become overpowering on your palate.
Sure. What's the ABV on this one?
This one is 12.5%. Yeah.
I can taste it.
Yeah, meaning that you think it's high or low?
A little bit high for what you would expect.
Okay.
From white wine.
Yeah, it's actually on the lower side technically, although I think what you're getting here is there is this what we describe as almost like aldehydic. So basically when wines go through a long aging process and they're exposed to more oxygen, the ethyl alcohol in this, or ethanol, which is the main kind of what we call drinking alcohol, right? That's the main alcohol produced for fermentation for all the beverages that we love. It will start to oxidize that alcohol, and there's something that's created called acetaldehyde. Okay, I know we're getting a little nerdy and technical here, but it's this kind of almost like sour apple type taste that can kind of almost add this feeling of heat, like heat, alcohol heat does to your throat. I think that's what
exactly what's happening.
Yeah. So it's just a little bit of a different expression. It's just another compound that's going on in the wine. Again, don't sweat the nerdy chemistry stuff, but that's something that is common. A good example of that, where you'd really get high levels of that, would be in sherry. So I don't know if anyone drinks sherry anymore. I almost brought sherry today because I love it so much, and I think it, along with champagne or sparkling wine, is one of the most versatile wine styles on the planet, because there's stuff from super vibrant and fresh to uber nutty and complex and savory, like the whole gamut. And then also dry to sweet. Most of it's dry, but there is sweet stuff too. So this is it's kind of like a cross between sherry, honestly, and champagne, this wine.
Really good.
Yeah. So this is 2008. So it's not only, it probably spent roughly... for these wines, this is Reserva, usually around 7 years in barrel, roughly. It depends on the vintage, and then in bottle for an additional time. So you are getting these richer, more what we describe as oxidative aromas and flavors, right? So again, similar to what we described in the champagne, but kind of turned up to 11 here, right?
Nice.
This is extra baked citrus and tree fruits, extra nutty. There is extra savory elements, right? If we want to describe it as schmaltzy chicken skin, or we could, for me, this is actually more.
There's something about this that reminds me of whiskey. I don't know what
Of what?
Of whiskey.
Whiskey?
Yeah. Well, it's probably the time in barrel, even though it's not new barrel, because most whiskey is a new barrel, so you get a lot of
But
those.
it's like a little bit barrely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And you have to think of every barrel as its own piece of quote unquote terroir as well.
Totally.
Because every barrel behaves differently. Every barrel has different microorganisms in it. This is blended, right? It's not just one barrel bottled, right? They'll blend a bunch of barrels. But like if you taste sherry, there are certain producers that will bottle just single barrels because they have such a unique character to them. But what we're getting here collectively is the unique character of a bunch of barrels and the wine in barrel for a long time. So yeah, it's really cool stuff.
So nutty.
So chefs, what would you pair this with if you're cooking some meat?
Dude, I'm still thinking the same way we were talking earlier with the champagne. There's so many different options. It's so minerally and also
It's
got
definitely
some-
richer, right? It's not quite as like cleanse the
Crisp.
palate.
Yeah.
It has like some sort of richness.
There's some
to
It's
it.
got some
Right.
butter in it,
Yeah.
some creaminess to it.
Because you don't have the CO2 anymore, so that's adding to the richness and taking away from the freshening factor of it. It's also way more autolytic, a little bit of acetaldehydes I mentioned before. So it's just again turned up
Be
to
more-
11. So
be
you'd
more
want,
like a pork wine than
You like a rich pork wine?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that would be awesome with like a huge fat cap that's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Jello. You know, like every
Ah.
bite you get that nice fat bit that just melts in your mouth.
It's like a pork
and this,
New York here.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
Definitely like a pork New York.
Yeah.
Or
That'd be
that
cool.
big fatty tomahawk pork chop.
Yeah. Man.
Or Mr. Tangie's
Yeah.
favorite, some poke belly.
Yep, pork
You
belly.
like the pork belly? Oh yeah,
Oh,
that'd
yeah.
be good. That'd be good with this, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, something though that wouldn't be. So there's some philosophy that goes to flavors of wine and flavors of food, right? So a good rule of thumb, and it's not an absolute by any stretch, is if you have a very complex flavored wine like we have here, right? You would generally want to try to keep the food a bit less. A little more straightforward and simple, right? Meaning you wouldn't want to take that pork belly and marinate it in soy and ginger
Crusted
and
and all kinds
Okay.
of different spices.
exactly. You'd want to kind of keep it a little more straightforward. Now, again, this is where the nuance comes in. So if you're picking things in that marinade that would work well with this wine, then go for it. But if you want to do something that is like, again, use soy, ginger, blah, whatever, it wouldn't really work as well with this because you have
Yeah.
a very complex pork bite and then a very complex wine. It's harder
Thinking of
to.
that.
You can do it, but it's just a lot harder to get them to jive together because there's so many flavors going on. So, as a general rule of thumb, keep one complicated, one simple.
Yeah.
In terms
I've
of
said
food and
before,
wine.
it's like definitely how you learn to do these pairings as you progress as a cook or a chef. It's like you taste the wine and you either try to marry it directly or you
Yeah.
alter it exactly to where the balance.
Yep.
It's all about balance for sure.
Yeah.
But to get that marriage where it's both right in the middle, like you're talking about, it's a tough thing to do.
It is. It's really tough, but that shouldn't deter you from trying, right? And at home doing these things. But if you start with that basic principle of simple and complex, like one being simple, one being complex, whether it's the food or the wine, taking each role, that will help you get there sooner. And then you can start to dial it in by adding things slowly but surely. But that to me is a really actually great mark of a amazing restaurant and restaurant staff is that the wine and the beverage people work with the cooks, right? To really work together to try things, not just think they're going to work out of pure theory, because there is so much nuance. They really have to work together, and the chefs have to be willing to create a dish, and the beverage folks have to be willing to open a bottle, and they have to all try it together and give feedback together and find maybe compromise or maybe find a solution to making that work better, right?
Yeah.
That's when restaurants really kill it with food and wine pairing, because again, there's no hard and fast rules and absolute rules when it comes to this stuff. It all is very, very nuanced. So in some ways that's intimidating, but it really shouldn't intimidate you, because at the end of the day, it's just about eating good food and drinking good wine, right?
For sure.
I love it.
Yeah.
So let's
No problem there.
let's pause for just a sec because I know this guy's gonna pull up, and he's real loud.
Here comes our Merlino.
Just tell him to turn his truck off.
Okay.
Mm.
All right, so we're gonna
Okay.
be unpacking this Merlino order here, but we're gonna just keep rolling with it because we are tasting wines with this Master Somm, and we're having a good time. And I was just mentioning how cool it is that we're doing a meat and wine pairing podcast, and we're using all white wines. I thought that was awesome, man. We're like breaking the mold. You would never think that. Most people would never think that, and I think it's really cool giving them some options on some unique things. So what's this third wine you have paired with us here?
Yeah, so the third one is coming from a region in France called Alsace, which is on the eastern border with Germany. And it's a really fascinating region from a historical standpoint because at certain points of its history, it was part of France. Other points, it was part of Germany. And it's kind of flip-flop back and forth. And as a result, it's developed a very unique kind of subculture that's not quite French and it's not quite German. Okay. It is Alsace. And it's a breadbasket of really delicious foods and wines. Some of the best...
Yep.
Sheesh.
We'll just hang on one sec. All right.
Okay, we good?
Yeah.
Let's give it a shot. Okay.
Let's give it a shot.
So going back to Alsace, it's a really amazing place from a food and culture standpoint because of this interesting history. It sounds weird, but one of my favorite period jam on the planet is made in Alsace, like jelly jam,
Oh, okay.
And the food is really interesting because it's a lot of like cured stuff, but also again, the big German influence, but French influence. It's very strange, but it's a really cool, beautiful place that sits along the Vosges mountain range, and all the vineyards are planted on the slopes of the Vosges, and they get really high levels of ripeness there because they are protected from the weather. And the wines, as a result, become very, very complex. But it's a tough spot from a consumer standpoint because sometimes the wines have a little bit of residual sugar and sometimes they don't. So, sugar's not very in vogue these days. And I understand why, it can be frustrating to not know what exactly the wine style is going to be. And that's why it's important to develop a relationship with your local wine shop. But when you get the wine that falls within your style, they are just immensely complex. You could write a tasting note on these wines that's, a mile long because they just can hang on the vine and develop so many flavors for so long. So this is Marcel Dice. It is 2016 Grasberg, which is a really cool site that sits above one of the most famous sites in the whole region called Altenberg de Bergheim. And it's a co-fermented field blend. So meaning that it's mainly 3 different varieties, Riesling, Gewürztraminer, and Pinot Gris, that are all grown together and then harvested together and fermented together. And he's a big proponent of biodynamic farming and also the field blends, which is the traditional style from this region. And it does have a little bit of residual sugar, what we will refer from here on out as RS, just to save ourselves some words. And that's a common wine term, RS, residual sugar. But it's not at a level that is cloying. There's still lots of acidity and freshness in this. It's just giving it a little bit of weight. But it also gives it a lot of flexibility in terms of food and wine pairing, because if you have a little bit of spice in your dish, a little bit of residual sugar goes a long way to taming that spice. And so like the classic combination would be, Prädikat, German Riesling, meaning, Spätlese or something like that with like Thai food, right? Or something along those lines. So this can work with that same concept, but at a lower residual sugar rate, and is therefore, I think, more flexible because you don't have as much sugar to contend with, right? So if you're talking about, in this case, bulgogi, okay, like you do the flank and ribs with bulgogi marinade, or that's how I do them at home anyways. You do it here with something else, I think. Slightly sweet, but also slightly spicy, that marinade, right? And so that I think would be perfect with this. This is something where you could take that pork belly that we were talking about earlier and add some zhuzh to it, spice it up, this would really work.
Yeah.
Tons going on in this.
Yeah,
it's like it's like so many different avenues that you can go. I mean, like really dry cheese, or even a funky cheese. Like there's dry hams, all kinds of different things that can, right? You can pick it up on some smoke here.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is this kind of smokiness to it. There's, with these co-fermented wines, what happens is these varieties will all have slightly different vegetative cycles, meaning they will ripen at different rates. And so when you harvest them together, which is not always the case, sometimes they'll go through and they'll pick one variety and then through another. But in the traditional sense of field blends, they will go through and pick everything at once. So that means some things are slightly underripe, some things are slightly overripe, and some things are perfectly ripe in the middle. So they all kind of balance out in the wash generally, and the underripe stuff adds more acid, so it compensates for the overripe stuff. But you get all this huge array of flavors because you get underripe flavors, overripe flavors, and just ripe flavors all together. And then the longer the wine kind of melds in the fermenter and in the bottle together, like this is 16, right? 2016, so it's had some time in bottle. The more complex it gets because all those things become more cohesive. And so again, you can write a tasting note a mile long on this thing. It's just so much going on, and it's so delicious. And that little bit of RS is just adding weight in the mid palate and just a hint of sweetness on the finish. But if you had something that was slightly spicy, and I'm not talking real spicy here, like very mildly spicy, you wouldn't even think about that residual sugar, right? And we're only talking about tiny amounts here. This is probably, our threshold generally is about 4 grams per liter, okay? What does a gram look like? A gram looks like a quarter teaspoon. So you're talking about in a liter of liquid, if 4 grams is our threshold, you're looking at 1 teaspoon of sugar, what would look like granulated sugar, in an entire liter. We're not talking about big calorie counts here, okay? And I think that's something that you as wine drinkers and lovers listening to this need to realize is that a little bit of residual sugar is not going to kill you. It's not a bad thing. It's actually playing a very important role here. And to give you some context, Coca-Cola has about 120 grams per liter. Okay. So if we're looking at, say, because we're tasting this and our threshold is 4, let's say it's at 10 grams per liter, right? We're looking at less than 10% of what a glass of Coca-Cola has, okay? So we're not talking about a lot of sugar, so don't sweat a little bit of sugar. It plays an important role. It adds complexity to the wine. It's not a bad thing, and please don't shy away from it.
Yeah, it adds diversity to your food pairing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It gives you more latitude to experiment with different things. Exactly. You're not so kind of predetermined because it's like bone dry or for whatever reason, you know, like you or it has crazy amounts of acid. This kind of really rides the middle so well. Like it has some acid, but a lot of phenolic richness, meaning a lot of flavor. Has a little bit of sugar. It has just like a bit of everything going on, which makes it really, really versatile.
Yeah. Aging 3 grapes in a wine together is not a very common practice. Is that correct?
It depends on the region. So if we look at, say, everyone's favorite grape, Cabernet Sauvignon, right? Sure. Especially when it comes to meat. If you're in, say, Napa, could that be what we call a varietal wine, meaning 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, or 100% whatever that variety is? That's quite common. But if we go to Bordeaux, for instance, because they have a relatively marginal climate, they're right on the Atlantic Ocean, there's often pressure at harvest, so they will often rely on other varieties to add a bit of safeguard from the farming standpoint, because Merlot ripens way earlier. So you'll often be a blend of Merlot and Cabernet, right? But we associate Bordeaux with Cabernet because that's the one that everyone loves. And because of Sideways fucked everything up for Merlot still. Even though that was like almost 20 years ago.
That's crazy.
That was, I believe, 2005, and we're still feeling the effects of that. It's still there. Yeah. Wow. So yes and no. It really just depends on the region, and certain regions have different laws that require different grapes, etc. Just again, ask your local wine pro what's in it. It makes life a lot easier. If you have an interest in studying it, cool. But there's a lot of, wine's made everywhere around the world. It's made in every state in the United States, believe it or not.
Every state?
Every state.
Wow.
Even in Alaska.
Really?
Yeah. So
dang.
it's an extremely complex subject, which is why I like it, because it's constantly evolving. But as we mentioned before, but also there's so many different iterations of it around the world.
What grapes do they grow in Alaska?
Mostly hybrids. So what we're tasting today, everything we're tasting today, is from a set of grapes called Vitis vinifera, which is a European-based grouping of grapes that is responsible for most of the quote-unquote fine wine. We have native grapes here in North America. On their own, most people don't like them because they have off flavors. But there are folks that work in genetics, et cetera, that have taken 2 different species and hybridized them, crossed them, to get some of the better flavors from Vitis vinifera and more of the hardiness from the North American varieties like Labrusca, et cetera. So they tend to fare better, in tougher weather, colder weather, et cetera, and they still have good flavor. So they're really on the rise these days, hybrid varieties, and there's some really fantastic wines that are made from them. So classically, they had a really kind of negative connotation because it's more about making viticulture possible in a tough climate and getting yield. So they are often associated with like cheap, high yield wines.
Sure.
These days, more care is being put into the farming and to the winemaking, and there's some really interesting, delicious wines that are made from hybrids.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. That's fascinating. Wow. My mind is like blown. I love it, man. This is cool. Like this type of wine, like you said, with the flanken ribs with Charlie's Bulgogi. Oh my gosh, this would be so good. This is great. It's just a little bit of sweetness. It's lighter.
It's really into it.
You know how much I love those flanken ribs with bulgogi, though, man. That's like I always want to say, like my favorite steaks, like just a New York with salt pepper. But no, dude, like give me those flanken ribs with bulgogi all day, bro. I will not shy away from the Yoshidas.
We know, bro.
But hey, if there's no bulgogi in the case, I'm going Yoshidas.
Talk
man.
about residual sugar.
A little bit of sugar in that, man. I gotta watch it.
It's like the Coca-Cola.
That is the Coca-Cola of
Teriyaki
bulgogi, yeah,
salt.
Oh
teriyaki.
yeah, it's pretty sweet. Yeah.
But so we kind of mentioned, we talked a little bit about pairing, with some Wagyu beef. Maybe what are some other like varietals or types of wine that would be really good with Wagyu beef? Because I think a lot of our listeners love that stuff.
Absolutely. If we want to go back to reds for a minute, as would be more expected, something like Syrah would be really fantastic. So Syrah has certain characteristics about it that give it a very meaty character, right? So there's things called rotundones in them, in Syrah, that come across as black pepper, as bacon fat, depending on the ripeness of the fruit itself. When it's harvested, it can express itself in different ways. Also, the winemaking can affect it. So people often describe them as charcuterie-like. So you can kind of bridge the meatiness, so to speak, between the variety itself of Syrah and the meat itself, right? So that can be something that can work really, really well. You could also look at taking a different approach, and because, say, certain cuts of Wagyu or American Wagyu are going to be really fatty, you can go for more of the acid approach, getting something that is relying only on tannin, getting something that's really crispy and crunchy. So something like Beaujolais could possibly work, or something really fun and different like Mondeuse from the Savoie from Eastern France could also work really well. Malbec grown at high elevation in Argentina, not seeing a lot of oak, seeing more like concrete, maybe from like Sebastian Zuccardi is a great example of that. Would be really delicious. And I mean, if you want to go anywhere for like the mecca of beef and wine together is Argentina. The ritual of the asado, the Sunday cookout that takes all day, that you just eat and eat and eat, many cuts, different cuts and many different proteins. It's just like, it's the coolest thing. If you haven't been there, you need to go and experience it. It's just, it's the best. It's the absolute best.
That's where I wanna go, man.
That's always, good approach too, is the old saying of what grows together goes together, right? Okay. Which is kind of corny, but it's true, right? You can go to I don't know, Loire Valley and look at those amazing goat cheeses that are made, and understand that the goats are eating a lot of the same things that are growing near the vineyards, and a lot of Sauvignon Blanc and Chenin Blanc are grown there. So there's a lot of bridging almost through terroir in a way, because the goats are eating the stuff around the grapes that are growing, and there's certain compounds that are shared between.
Craziness, that's nuts.
Yeah, like all of those things. This is the kind of the next wave of looking at wine, in my opinion, is looking at it not as a singular thing, but looking at it as a whole entity. Meaning, okay, you have grapes growing in a vineyard, but what else is living around that vineyard? what else is growing around that vineyard? Because when you get into monoculture, that's where things get very sterile and stale and boring. But when you add more biodiversity to the area, and this goes for farming beef or any farm animals, right? Bees, all sorts of stuff, honey. Yeah, you can taste the difference in honey, right?
There's lavender honey. There's that's specifically made for that reason, right?
100%. So this is where wine is moving, is more towards this kind of entire entity rather than saying this is Cabernet, right? That's it.
Yeah.
End of story, right? That's no longer the conversation. And it's slow to move because, there's some people that are intimidated by that factor. We don't fully understand it yet.
A little resistance, maybe.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And there's also a lot of trendy bullshit that is happening too at the same time.
Always.
Yeah, that we were just when the truck was here talking about labeling, and you've done a podcast on that before. How there's so much bullshit within the labeling of meat. The same thing happens in wine, not only through labeling but also through just trends about what is good in wine and what is bad in wine. To get on a soapbox real quick. Feel free to edit this out, but is sulfur, right? Like a lot of people this is a hot topic in wine media, and now with the average consumer does this wine have added sulfur or sulfites, right?
Yeah.
Because they've been painted as a villain, when the reality is that there's very little used in the production of wine, especially when you compare it to any kind of processed food. It's a really small amount in wine, and it's also not bad for you at all. And it keeps the wine in a state that the winemaker intended it to be in your glass and for you to be consuming it as. Because if you don't have a little bit of protection, if you think about the logistics of wine coming from a faraway place, it's generally really bad for the wine. Okay, if you want to drink a no sulfite added wine that was made in your local region, cool, go for it, because you have way more control over the logistics of getting it from A to Z in your belly, right? But if it's coming from France or wherever, long ways away, there's so many opportunities for things to go wrong for that wine, and for you basically to be paying for wine that's not in the state it was intended to be in.
A lot of variables.
Okay.
There's a lot of variables.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You say there's a lot of moving parts.
A lot
There's
of
a lot
moving
of moving
parts. It's the old Chef Tyler slogan. We love it.
There's a lot of moving parts there.
No, it's good. I mean, when we talk about meat, we talk about how we love getting it from the farmer who we met into the hands of Preservation Meats, who we know and are good friends with, and then to us, to our consumers. So it's comes from the farm in the way, and it gets to us the way it's intended to be. And I think that there's a lot that that means a lot to us, and it means a lot to our consumers. So when we know it's not going through a bunch of different hands or devaluing itself by the time it gets to us.
Absolutely, or degrading the quality of it. I mean, food has a lot of food has the opportunity to be frozen, right? Which freezing is not bad. Okay, people, it plays a role, and it can be a really good preservation technique. You can't freeze wine. It just doesn't work, okay? So you need to have some other kind of protectant. And honestly, there is no such thing as sulfite-free wine, because sulfur and sulfur compounds are created during the acts of fermentation. If you want to drink wine, it's going to have some kind of sulfur compound in it. That is naturally created by yeast as it transforms sugar into alcohol, CO2, and heat. You get sulfur compounds. So there's no escaping it. And that's okay, because there's nothing wrong with it. Sure, if you were to consume it at high levels, it would be bad, okay? But we're talking very, very, very small, totally safe levels. If it wasn't safe, we wouldn't be able to do it, okay? And again, to compare it to, like, say, dried fruit or many other foodstuffs, there's many multipliers more of sulfites in those things than there is in wine. So please don't listen to the hype, okay? Move on from sulfur.
Don't believe the hype.
Yeah, we need to focus on more important things like packaging choices and our carbon footprint for transporting those big, Starfucker Cabernet bottles that you get out of Napa that weigh literally 5 pounds for just the bottle, in some extreme cases. Think of that impact. That's way more important to talk about than if the wine has a little bit of sulfur in it or not. Or let's talk about how much copper is used in the farming that is legally allowed and necessary to a degree, but allowed in like organic, biodynamic, all that stuff. But what what is the impact on the soil over years and years and years of using that? Because it's a heavy metal, it doesn't go anywhere, and you're poisoning the soil. So let's talk about things like that rather than something that is inconsequential as sulfur in your wine. I'm exiting the soapbox now.
Soapbox.
Yeah.
Stepping down.
Yeah.
Just so Tange knows, my mom might be sending you a bar of soap in the mail.
Yeah.
Wash your mouth out.
I've already gotten one. I've already
Got
gotten one.
one. She's
Yeah.
had it
Oh,
with
okay.
me
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
for my whole life.
I
so
thought that
she
was
knows
part of the
that.
jam. Like
Well,
you guys swear all the time. So I
We
just-
do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we do.
Just Mama P.
I don't know if she
doesn't-
knows that you're her
doesn't
son, because you you tend to have a little bit of a dirty mouth.
Appropriate.
Yes, yes. You must get it from your father then.
Yes. No. Yeah.
So, talking a little bit about the wine labels, is
Yeah.
there? I think. Oh, let's start off here. I think a lot of people buy wine based on price, right? I know I do, like, oh, I need a better bottle of wine. I'm going to go get that $30 bottle instead of the $10 bottle, or a $100 bottle instead of the $50 bottle, right? So is there anything like on these wine labels that you can, look at and maybe, tell that they're a little bit better than others? Is there one where, hey, this is a $20 bottle, but it's actually better than the $30 bottle because of this? Is there anything like that? Because wine labels are very confusing, I think, to us, to the normal people out there just wanting to have some wine with meat.
They are absolutely confusing. And the problem is it comes down to the individual region. They all have their own requirements for labeling and what that label actually means, right? So a lot of people, I guess a good example of this is German wine labels, okay, which intimidate a lot of people because the names are stupid long and not stupid, they're very long, and it's in a different language, right? So it's intimidating to, say, the average American consumer. But they're actually really full of information and really fantastic in a lot of ways. You just need to learn the rules of engagement when it comes to that label. So those labels will tell you pretty much everything you need to know about the wine, where exactly it comes from, what variety it is, what ranking the vineyard has, all sorts of stuff, right? So it's very specific. There are other labels that can tell you absolutely nothing, okay? We call those proprietary labels. So they could be it's just a name that the winery comes up with for the wine, right? Like, I don't know, La Muse, right? To use a kind of cult Sonoma wine made by Verite. We know, if you do the research, that's Merlot based, and to do the research, that Verite is in Sonoma. They will say Sonoma on the label, but all you will get basically is Sonoma, the winery name, and the proprietary cuvee name, right? It's not going to tell you that much. Maybe the back label has some on there, maybe not. So there's sometimes, yes, there's things you can look for, and sometimes there's nothing you can do other than look it up on the internet, right? Yeah. Or talk to your local wine shop professional.
Trust your butcher.
Yeah,
exactly.
We talk about that. Trust your butcher, get to know them as well. But like you're saying, the same thing. Learn, find a somm or find that wine shop expert and trust their opinion.
Yeah, trust their opinion, their information. I mean, you can always double check it. We all have a pocket oracle with us at all times, right? Not a smartphone. But really, you should be embracing your community and supporting your community and learning through real people rather than your device all the time. It'd be my 2 cents. Because there is no cheat code for labeling, unfortunately. Okay. And it's just so variable from region to region. And also there's a new trend with the whole natural wine movement because of they're basically going against the rules of a given appellation, right? So we see this where this producer's like, I don't want to follow the rules of this appellation, so I therefore legally can't label my wine, say, whatever, Vouvray from the Loire Valley in France, right? Okay. I still want to make this Chenin Blanc, but my own way, or maybe it's not even Chenin Blanc. Maybe it's another, obscure variety that they want to grow in this region. They have to downgrade the labeling, and basically they can offer less information by law. So it gets confusing in that way too. So you need to just trust the person that you're buying it from to give you the information, and someone that's worth receiving your business and your money is going to have that information for you as well. So don't be, have that expectation as a consumer, as a supporter of a given place. They better know their stuff, right, as well, if they're expecting to get your business. So it goes both ways, right? I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it's true. It is, you know, so instead of going into a big Bevmo and just looking at everything, you know, go to a local wine shop and actually talk to somebody and
Absolutely.
ask them for their advice, man.
It's
It means
exactly
so much
what
more.
it's exactly what we say to people about going out and buying meat. Right? You're gonna go to
Yep.
Costco. You're gonna go to the grocery store, or you're gonna come here and talk to one of us eye to eye. And
Yeah.
where does it come from? And
Yeah.
what's the name of the farmer? And blah blah blah.
And,
It's the
and guess what?
exact same
I
thing.
cooked that last night, and it was awesome. And I used this rub. Check it out. I
All
mean, it
that.
just means a lot. Yeah, to understand that. Well, wow, man, we got a lot of information. This has been awesome, man. Yeah, this will definitely be a little 2-part series for us. It was really cool, though. I mean, what is there anything else that you feel like we need to discuss when pairing meat and wine, or anything that we left out that we didn't cover?
Just to reiterate what we talked about at the beginning, which is there really are no rules. I mean, experiment, have fun.
Try
you
new
know,
stuff.
exactly. You should try stuff that you would think that would never work, because it will often surprise you.
Yeah, yeah.
There are pairings that blow me away all the time. I'm like, oh, let's just try this. It may totally suck. It may be totally awesome.
Yeah.
Right. So just have fun with it and try. You know, what I like to do is I like to drink roughly 70% of the time what I know I'm gonna like, and I'm excited to drink, and then the other 30% I will try something new and different. A new producer, a new variety, a new approach to the winemaking, whatever it may be. And I'm constantly pushing myself to try something different. And you know what? Sometimes I don't like it, but that's okay. That's part of the process. And at least I had an interesting time with it, rather than just going to back to my old standby and drinking the same stuff over and over again. You know, we have not to get too philosophical, but we have a very short amount of time on this earth, and there's so many amazing things to discover. To get stuck in like a small handful of things that we can rely on and only drink and eat those things, you're really missing out. Yeah. So just push yourself a little bit. It doesn't need to be all the time. 20 to 30% of the time, push yourself to try new things.
That's dope, man. Hey, one last question. I got $20 in my pocket. I give it to you, and I go, hey, I need the coolest wine to take to my mom's for a barbecue on Sunday. What would you get?
$20.
$20.
Barbecue. Okay, not knowing your mom's taste, because that would be an important part of this equation. But to quickly answer your question, I would say go buy some Zinfandel. Zinfandel or Grenache with barbecue is amazing. Okay. As long as it's not too alcoholic of an example, and the barbecue's not spicy, because that's the one and hard fast rule that I live by. But other than that, I think Zinfandel is really slept on for barbecue, and especially when it sees a little bit of age. And Zinfandel is just not an expensive wine, right? Yeah. You can get a lot of great Zinfandel for $15 to $20.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's not the answer I was thinking you were going to go to.
What were you going to think?
I was going to say Pinot Noir, something that's a little bit more mellow.
It's expensive.
Yeah,
That's right, Charlie. You
stuff,
can't get good Pinot Noir for less than like $30 these days at the minimum. It's hard. Again, thank you, Sideways.
I was thinking crowd pleaser. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you'll be surprised. Zinfandel is a super crowd pleaser because it's got luscious fruit. It hits all the fruit spectrums of red, black, and blue fruits. It generally still has a bit of acid, so it's still refreshing. It has a little something for everybody, and it walks that middle line, kind of like this white wine to some degree, where it has something for everyone, and it's not too tannic, not too acidic. It just does everything kind of like right down the middle. It's good.
I had a very interesting pairing, mind blown, in France last summer. 3 times in different restaurants they paired ripe raspberries with English peas.
Oh yes, I've had that
I was
actually.
like, no way. One of them was like a smoked, like haddock, like whitefish with it. It was like, it blew my mind. I was like, no ways, that's gonna be fucking good. Nope.
And was it?
So good.
When it's done right, it's so good.
unbelievable.
It's all about the peas
Right?
being
It's
not too
There
starchy
you go.
and
Try something different.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
yeah.
Nice.
right?
Yeah, I mean, a good example of this that probably everyone can relate to now is, remember back in the day when people started putting sea salt on chocolate chip cookies?
Yeah.
Okay. Which
Boom.
today seems like, what's the big deal? Like, that's how they all come or should come, right?
Regular.
But back then, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, I'm talking like early
Salted
2000s. Yeah,
Really?
like people were like, what? You know, and like, that sounds so weird. It's like, yeah, it sounds weird. Just try it. And, it works for a reason. And now it's like mainstream to do that. And so
Dude.
it just shows you that things are constantly evolving and things will surprise you that will eventually just become normal one
And
day.
on that note, Chef Charlie's making Ruffles potato chip Rice Krispie treats. So,
Whoa.
boom, mind
Have you had
blown.
that, Dan?
No,
Bro,
I need
dude,
to come
it's
this
the
Sunday.
next
Crushed
thing,
up
dog.
Ruffles.
It's the next
Ah,
thing.
yeah.
And a Rice Krispie treat.
Well, hey, cheers,
Yeah.
guys.
Cheers.
Hey.
Chris, thank you so much for
That was fun.
coming on and
Of course,
hitting
yeah.
us up and yeah, talking wines, man. Let's sign it off for the Lady J Meat Dudes. I'm Evan.
Excuse me, I'm Tyler.
Charlie.
And I'm Chris.
Boom. We
go.
will see you next time.